On July 29, 2023, hurricane-like winds hit DC and the surrounding area.
Speed of the winds. I mean, I've never seen winds that fast before.
People ran to their homes, businesses closed, and everyone held on for dear life, trying to stay safe from the dangerous winds. Everyone except one person. One soldier did not budge. He had a job to do, and it was a job that had been done 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for nearly 100 years. This is the story of that soldier, his job, and what it means to be the one to carry out a mission that has gone on for over 100 years. A mission that is the symbol of every American soldier who didn't make it home. In World War I, the United States saw the deaths of over 100,000 service members. After the war had ended, the families of the deceased were given what could only be called a hard choice. They could either have the remains of their loved ones moved back to the United States, or their bodies would be buried in army graveyards in France. For some families, they chose to have their loved ones' remains brought back. But for the vast majority, they decided that their loved ones deserved to rest in France, side by side with their comrades. But not all families were given that choice. Because of the horrific consequences of the war, not all soldiers could be identified. These soldiers were buried in graves, simply marked as unknown. But these men were still heroes, and it was decided that there needed to be some sort of way to pay respects to those who lost their lives fighting for freedom. And in 1921, the U.S. Congress approved the creation of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. The first of the unknown soldiers who would reside in the tomb was chosen on Memorial Day 1921. 4 unknown servicemen were exhumed from 4 World War I American cemeteries in France and Saint-Mihiel. U.S. Army Sergeant Edward F. Younger was given the honor of selecting the unknown soldier by placing a spray of white roses on one of the caskets. The chosen soldier was transported and arrived in the U.S. on November 9, 1921, with the burial taking place 2 days later, on the 11th, Armistice Day, at Arlington National Cemetery. On that day alone, over 90,000 people visited the tomb to pay their respects. In 1958, President Dwight D. Eisenhower officiated a ceremony to choose an unknown soldier from World War II and the Korean War to take his place in the tomb. 2 World War II unknowns, one from the European theater and one from the Pacific, were exhumed and flown to the U.S., and finally one was chosen. Then this happened one more time, as the unknown soldier from the Korean War was chosen from unidentified remains in the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific in Hawaii. With this, the count stood at 3 soldiers laid to rest in the tomb. Then on May 28, 1984, a 4th soldier from the Vietnam War was laid to rest in the tomb. However, the remains were identified in 1998 through DNA testing, leaving the Vietnam crypt empty but symbolically guarded. The tomb itself is a work of art designed and made by sculptor Thomas Hudson Jones and architect Lorimer Rich. It weighs a staggering 80 tons and was completed in 1932. There is an inscription on the tomb that reads, "Here rests in honored glory an American soldier known but to God." It should be no surprise that the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier sees a lot of tourists, over 3 million a year in fact. But if you consider it a simple tourist attraction, then you'd be wrong, because it's more than just another attraction for people to stare at. It's an important piece of American history and a symbol of the Army's respect for their dead. The Tomb of the Unknown Soldier sees a lot of its visitors on Memorial Day and Veterans Day in particular. This is because a lot of people come to pay their respects and observe the wreath-laying ceremonies that are held there, often led by the president. On Memorial Day, this happens along with a national moment of remembrance at exactly 3 p.m. At this time, everyone takes a minute of silence for all those who have died before making a prayer for continued peace. The Tomb of the Unknown Soldier constantly sees veterans and Gold Star families who visit to pay their respects and feel closer to those they may have lost. It is even regarded as a pilgrimage to be made by members of the U.S. Army. They come to pay their respects and honor those who came before them. But who are these people who stand and watch over the soldiers? And who have done so since 1948? Well, the brave and resilient soldiers who do that are none other than the 3rd U.S. Infantry Regiment, also known as the Old Guard. They are the oldest active duty infantry unit in the United States Army. Their number one task is to make sure that the unknown soldiers who laid down their lives for their country are always protected. But the Old Guard doesn't just accept anyone into their ranks. The role of guarding the tomb that represents not just one but all the fallen servicemen is viewed with great respect. Every prospect starts off with a demanding 2-week trial to see if they fit for the prestigious role. This is a trial that only 20% of candidates manage to pass. Over those 2 weeks, they're made to take a series of tests and evaluations, including a physical test to see if they have the strength and stamina required, as well as a written test. They also have to learn the manual of arms, the history of the position, and the history of the Arlington National Cemetery. This includes learning about the history of the tomb itself, the proper procedures for guarding it, and the specific rituals involved in the changing of the guard. All of this is encompassed in a 35-page manual that they have to memorize. One other key factor for joining the Old Guard is height. All the candidates must be between 5 feet 10 inches and 6 feet 2 inches tall. This is so they can maintain the uniformity of the Guard. They must also commit to serving at the tomb for a specific period, often a year or longer, and must be prepared for the physical and mental demands of the duty. After they go through all of that, they are now ready to guard the tomb. But when the Old Guard watches over the tomb, they don't just watch it, they guard it solemnly, following routines that have stood for almost 100 years to pay their respects. They walk exactly 21 steps in front of the tomb, pause for 21 seconds, and then turn and do it again. Each element of the routine has meaning, with the number 21 repeated to represent the highest symbolic military honor that can be bestowed, the 21-gun salute. And this routine has been repeated consistently for almost 100 years. So consistently, in fact, that you can see depressions where the ground was worn from their steps. But the most astounding part, and the one that got this started, is the fact that they remain on duty and guard the tomb at all times, even during extreme events or weather conditions. Even as Hurricane Isabel rampaged in 2003, the Old Guard refused to abandon their post. Even when the entire world lay in turmoil after 9/11 happened, the Old Guard manned their positions, utterly dedicated to their role. But why do the Old Guard take this role so seriously? The tomb of the unknown soldier is guarded out of respect for the servicemen who paid the ultimate price for serving their country. Servicemen who gave even their identity to protect the lives of others. And the family members of these servicemen will never know what happened to their loved ones. And so each and every one of these people who have lost someone they cared about can go to the tombs of the unknown soldier and feel like they're visiting their own family member. The unknown soldier doesn't just represent one person. They represent the thousands of dead and missing servicemen and the thousands of family members who don't know. It might be one tomb, but it is also thousands of graves. With one of the most important and symbolic jobs in the world, the dedication of the Old Guard to their duty is total and wholehearted. They help make sure that no matter what, the tomb of the unknown soldier stands not just as a monument, but as a beacon of national unity, honor, and sacrifice. And may their sacrifice never be in vain.